This video is brought to you by the community. Thank you to my channel members for your continued support. Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to finally take a look at the SAN'TOK.YAI. A lot of people have been waiting for this ship for quite some time. It did get held back due to the Cockpit not getting a go for its pass, so it took a little bit longer than we were expecting. It is at first glance a very interesting, maneuverable, very sleek in design looking kind of ship with some interesting features. So the cockpit, as you can see here, classic Xi'an control scheme converted for the effortless human use. Now they did say, although this is an alien ship, they wanted to keep more of the alien, but just make it borderline usable for the humans. So they tried to keep true to the Xi'an type of technology. Missiles, it has 8 of those located in the nacelles or winglets, I guess you could call those. It has some interesting weapons and of course dual vector thrusters, so maneuverability really isn't an issue for this ship. The acceleration is fairly respectable and this thing handles very well in atmosphere, and it has a custom made shield generator that provides dynamic coverage of the ship itself, so it's quite interesting. It has some unique features on board, and it's finally here. Now, it's a very sort of niche ship. I'm very fond of the alien ships in game. They are a bit more pricey than the human stuff, but it is certainly a very interesting ship to look at. So we have, at the moment, the ship is in its flight mode. It has a landing configuration and a flight configuration, and the quantum travel in this thing is incredible, especially when you're sat in that bubble cockpit. The immersion of traveling with the unique alien QT traveling is pretty cool. It's a really nice place to sit. You can also get a nice vision of the engines to your left and right, which are incredible. They animate depending on what you're trying to do with the ship, so it's pretty cool. Very similar to the stuff that we've seen from the Mirai, the Furies. The way those engines operate is pretty much exactly the same, so it is kind of unique in that sense. I wouldn't say it's particularly good looking. It's very insectoid, which is a look they were going for, and they tried to stay true to the Xi'an sort of technology, just make it suitable for humans whilst keeping most of that alien vibe, which I think is a huge selling point to these ships, right? The Xi'an is incredible. I think the Xi'an, although not a fighter, is probably the better ship than this at the moment. There are issues with this ship. As I said, we'll discuss those as we move on through the video. So first impressions of the ship was, I was very impressed with its maneuverability. This thing does not slouch. It is extremely nimble, and in the right hands, I have no doubt that a skilled M50 or Razor pilot or Arrow pilot is going to have a good time in this ship and put this thing to work. The weapons have a ridiculous fire rate, so a lot of rounds down target. But it's just a very unique ship to look at. It shares the characteristics of its little brother, the Aopoa the SAN'TOK.YAI. God, I nearly forgot the name of that. As we would expect, they look similar in design, especially with the bubble cockpit and that sort of prominent nose located underneath. And I actually kind of feel like the ship looks better in its landing configuration for some reason. I feel it just looks a little bit more sleeker when it's in this format as opposed to its flight configuration. Sorry, I just think it looks a little bit better, a little bit more poised in some angles of looking at the ship and its landing configuration. But yeah, both configurations look pretty good, but for some reason I just think the landing configuration makes the ship look a bit more poised. I'm not quite sure why. That's just my personal opinion. Right, moving on then. The cockpit. The cockpit is very, very cool. Okay, there are some issues I have with the cockpit, and I will bring them up towards the end of the video, but for first impressions, we have our 2 control spheres here, which is unique. We have seen it in other ships, of course, but obviously humans don't use that. They use a HOTAS or a HOSAS system. 2 MFDs, lots of lights. The radar is in the center of the screen. That is an issue point for me as well. We'll cover that as we continue, but it's a very pleasant place to sit, and as you can see, when you're in QT, you really are in that QT with this bubble cockpit. It's a very, very cool experience to be sat in here traveling like that. Very unique. I like the QT jumps from the aliens. It's pretty cool stuff. So internally, it's a nice place to sit. Does have issues. Now, when it comes to combat, I haven't really had the chance to take this out and test it combat-wise. Now, I'm sure it will absolutely be fun to fly, because those maneuvering thrusters are quite simply ridiculous. It's very similar to that of the Furies, and the fire rate of those guns is also a huge plus. So I'm just wondering where and how I might use one of these ships. I didn't pick one up. I did originally pick up a concept, I believe, and then changed it for something else. The problem I have with this ship is not the ship itself, it's the fact that, well, I have a Lightning. The Lightning has kind of made everything else not worth having in some regards, because it's just such a great ship. This, I think, is going to be very niche. Its range is terrible, by the way. It has awful range. I think ArcCorp to Hurston drained 3/4 of the tank, so it doesn't particularly have great range. You would definitely want to change the QT drive for something that's going to give you range, or you are going to be constantly refueling. So SAN'TOK.YAI literally translates into a ship that creates genuine fear. It's the human export model of the Xi'an military medium fighter of the same name. It is manufactured by Aopoa. It features the newer generation of Xi'an flight systems, upgraded dual vector thrusters, and Xi'an weaponry, manufactured by Torral Aggregate. Features: maneuverability, cutting through space and air with acrobatic precision and grace. Aopoa's distinct wing placement and low iconic dual vector thrusters allow the SAN'TOK.YAI to literally fly circles around the competition. Weapons. The vehicle comes as standard with 3/4 size 3 Torral Aggregate Yang 2 laser repeaters. That is quite the mouthful, I can tell you that much. 4 size 3s of those. My apologies. Right, so we have 4 of these unique weapon systems on board, and as you can see, the animations are pretty cool. They do look like they are twin-barreled in a housing, which has this really kind of awesome looking animation. Now, I've not got my finger fully down on the trigger here. This is just burst fire, so we can see the animation, because the fire rate on these weapons is honestly extremely rapid. It doesn't pack too much of a punch, I don't think, but the fact that you can just put so many rounds down range is obviously a plus. The missiles are located in the winglets, or the wings, or the nacelles, or whichever way you wish to refer to them. They're sort of burrowed in there, awaiting your target designation. And let's listen to the sound of this ship. So as you can see, I think we're at Walla, or Lyria, one of the two, and the maneuverability, as I said, is fairly rapid and response. But the sound of this ship, it is a very unique sound, but I can tell you, I'm not a fan of it. It quickly grates on me. It starts to sound like a Volkswagen Beetle. It is not a sound effect that I enjoy. It's not quite... The Banu Defender sounds so unique and awesome. This becomes, for me personally, of course this is absolutely subjective, extremely annoying. I am not a fan of the sound of this ship, unfortunately. So it kind of puts me off of it in that regard. But let's take a look at the weapons and components that we will find on board the SAN'TOK.YAI. Okay, so we have a length of 24 meters, a mass of 106,566 kilograms, width 23, combat speed is 265, has a height of 10 meters, and yeah, as you'd expect, it's not particularly a massive ship. Role, medium fighter, crew of 1. Length, as you can see there, 2 variations for the flight and landing configuration. SCM speed 265. Power plant, we have 2 size 1s. Quantum drive, we have 1 size 1. We have 1 size 1 jump drive. Thrusters are the 4 main. Rotate to retros. Quantum fuel tank is 1 size 1. We have a standard fuel tank of 1 times size 1. Shield generator 1 times size 2. Coolers 2 times size 1. Battery 1 times size 1. Life support 1 times size 1. Computer, radar, all size 1s, as you would expect. Let's take a look in game then at what that translates to in actual components themselves. So for the coolers we have 2. These are the polars, which are grade B military size 1 grade 2s. Power plant, we have the Dynaflux, and we have 2 power plants. These are military grade size 1 grade 2. And then finally the QT drive, which I strongly suggest you swap out to maybe the Atlas, if I think that's the correct size. Yes, it is. This is a military grade, but honestly you won't get anywhere in the verse. You definitely need to swap that out. Shield generator is the full stop size 2 grade 3. This is a military shield generator to be found on board the SAN'TOK. Missiles, we have the Tempest 2, which is a size 2 missile, and it is a cross-section missile. Now, talking about the missiles, there is a bug where I could not launch the missiles. So if you own the ship, that will need to be fixed. The weapons are the Yang 2 repeaters, size 3, and again with a ridiculous amount of fire rate. We have 4 of those on board. So unfortunately, I couldn't get the missiles to operate, which is extremely annoying. Obviously, it will clearly be fixed. So those are the components that we will find on the SAN'TOK.YAI. So who is this ship for then, really? Well, I can see this working in various roles. I think alongside its little brother, the K2AO, I think reconnaissance would play a very nice hand into the SAN'TOK.YAI because it is so maneuverable alongside the K2AO. The fire rate, as you can see, is ridiculous. Doesn't put a lot of DPS out, but the ability to fly this quickly and dance around your opponent is always going to be an advantage. I don't think the ship will take too much punishment though, and I'm wondering how badly the ship will fly if you lose one of those wings. Kind of similar, we've all been in the Cutlass when we've lost an engine. I imagine that this ship, if it was to suffer the same fate, would be quite hard to control. So I find it will be useful in a sort of reconnaissance hit and run tactics. I think will suit both of these ships. You can see the K2AO there alongside his bigger brother. Both of these ships have roles. I think reconnaissance is predominantly how I would choose to use one. Maybe some light bounty hunting, etc. Things of that nature I think will suit these ships because they're pure in and out hit and run, and their maneuverability I think is a plus for sure. They look great. They do look great. They are very unique, but there are some issues. Again, we have a very unique cockpit entrance where it's like the seat drops out to the side, scoops you up and puts the pilot in that wonderful bubble seat straight onto the control spheres. Cockpit design failed the first time around, so they tweaked it and got it up to standard, and it is very impressive there, but there are some things that irritate me about it. But as you can see, it does fly exceedingly well in atmosphere. You know, as we would expect from this type of ship. So I can't really recommend it for any sort of role other than reconnaissance and maybe light fighter work. Maybe having a couple of these defending the fleet to get rid of pesky skirmishers, skirmishing tactics and things of that nature. I think is where this ship is going to be at the forefront, just purely because it's so maneuverable. And who doesn't like hit and run tactics? It could be quite fun to do that. But for those bigger battles, for the bigger targets, I don't think this ship will be too potent in that regard. We'll have to wait and see how the ship balancing takes effect. You know, master mode is going to be a key factor in a lot of ships. We're just going to have to wait and see exactly how this ship pans out and fits in the verse with the various other competition that it has. Because don't get me wrong, it is awesome, but just there's something that makes me feel like it's lacking somewhere, and I can't put my finger on what it is. Because you could go by components, you could go by firepower. I don't think that's the case. There's something that doesn't quite sit right with me with this particular ship, which is a shame because it is awesome. So let's talk about some of the issues that it has. Now normally this is the part of the video where I do the walk around, and as you can see this is a bug, so the ship just will not sit still. It's infuriating, so that's why we can't do the walk around. So we can get in the cockpit. So we're in the cockpit and it's a lovely bubble cockpit. Bubble cockpits throughout history have been extremely advantageous because they offer a ridiculous amount of visibility, thus situational awareness. So clearly this is a good cockpit for the combat scenarios, the reconnaissance scenarios, or any other missions you wish to take this ship and the Car 2L into. So that's a huge plus. Bubble canopies, always good. My issue with the cockpit, let's go over this. So as you can see, we have the buttons, which are still labelled in Xi'an letters, right? The problem is, you'll note that the text for those buttons are blue, which completely blends into the cockpit itself and makes it very difficult to read. It's even worse, I feel, if you're flying towards the Stanton Star. It's very difficult to read that text. You see, disable shields is nearly invisible. So this was an oversight for this ship. I'm sure that will get remedied because the CRG have been knocking these ships out of the park. So despite the ship bouncing on the landing pad, which is extremely annoying, the fact that the text blends into all of this blue is probably more annoying because it makes it a little bit more difficult to operate the ship. The radar is not flush, and it is extremely difficult to pick out targets, quite difficult to read. So although the cockpit's not bad as it stands at the moment, it needs work and needs dialing in a bit more. More polish must be applied. But there we go, guys. Apart from those minor niggles, this is a good ship, but not at its full potential. And if you enjoyed today's video, you know what buttons to press, and I of course will have more Star Citizen content en route to your location soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Cheers.